Right, I've given everyone an extra minute, so we can kick off. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Money Counts training, a cash-first approach to food insecurity. It's great to see so many of you join us online today. This session is brought to you by the Glasgow Fair Food for All Partnership in collaboration with the Independent Food Aid Network, Trussell, Citizens Advice Scotland, and supported by the Glasgow Centre for Population Health. My name is Faiza Hansraj-Jackson. I'm a public health practitioner specialist at the Glasgow Centre for Population Health, and I'm also the coordinator for Glasgow's Cash First project. The other speakers this morning will tell you a lot more about Cash First, what Cash First approaches are and why they matter. And if you are interested in finding more about Glasgow's Cash First project, you can watch the recording of the webinar we held earlier this month. This morning, there'll be 4 short presentations which will provide an overview of poverty, food insecurity, cash-first approaches, and the Worrying About Money leaflet, followed by overviews from both Trussell and Citizens Advice Scotland. These will be followed by a panel Q&A session. We very much hope that today's webinar will provide you with a lot more information and understanding of the importance of a cash-first approach to food insecurity and poverty, and the financial advice and cash-first support options that are available in Glasgow. Before we start, I just want to let you know that today's webinar is being recorded, and we will circulate the link to the recording to participants. You'll also be able to access the link on the GCPH website along with other GCPH webinars. If you have any questions for our speakers today, please use the Q&A function only. We will do our best to get all your questions answered, but if we aren't able to ask them all due to the high number of people attending today, we'll get back to you. We would ask you to use this for questions rather than just general comments. Our events team will use the chat function to post links relevant to the presentations as you're seeing them. So, with no further ado, I am now pleased to introduce our first speaker, Emma Österberg. Emma has been working with the Independent Food Aid Network as a project officer since August 2022. IFAN is a leading advocate of a cash-first approach to food insecurity and has been calling for an end for the need of charitable food aid in the UK since 2016. Emma leads work to co-develop, update and disseminate the Worrying About Money Cash First referral leaflets alongside local partners in Scotland as well as in the rest of the UK. IFAN's Cash First referral leaflet project is part of one of 9 Cash First actions included in the Scottish Government's plan towards ending the need for food banks. Emma has been responsible for co-running numerous Money Counts training sessions linked to Worrying About Money leaflets from Cornwall to Moray. Emma also speaks on behalf of IFAN at events, works on IFAN's data collection and analysis, and supports member organisations. Emma is going to talk to us about poverty, food insecurity, cash-first approaches, and the Worrying About Money leaflet. Over to you, Emma.
Thanks, Faiza. Just pop my slides up. You should see those okay, hopefully. So hi everyone, like Faiza said, I'm Emma from the Independent Food Aid Network. If you've not heard of us before, we are a network of independent food aid providers and we support and advocate on behalf of our UK-wide membership, which includes hundreds of independent food banks. And like Faiza said, our vision is of a country without the need for charitable food aid, where adequate and nutritious food is affordable to all. I'll talk a little bit more about what that actually means later on in the session. But I'm just going to start on a brief presentation and then we can move on to our next speakers. The aim of today's training is to provide you with a lot of information about how to use the leaflet as a tool to support you in your day-to-day work, as well as provide you with information about like why people are struggling and what things are impacting people and where to signpost them to help. I'm going to ask you to go on to this tool called Mentimeter, menti.com. I believe someone is going to magically pop a link in the chat, or then you can just use that QR code that you can see on the screen. We want to start the session by gauging your level of understanding and knowledge at this point. And then later on, right at the end of the session, we're going to come back to it. And then we can check, right, okay, have we actually learned something during the session? So please take some time to fill out the 3 questions. They're completely anonymous. It just helps us kind of understand where we are at the start of the session, and then when we get back to right at the end, like how did we do, and helps us evaluate the sessions as well. So I'll just give you a little bit of time to go and do that. I can see responses coming in, which is fantastic. And while you fill that out, I'm just going to move on because we have so much to cover during this session. So please keep filling it out, but I'm just going to move along. So let's talk a little bit about poverty. I think this is a good place to start with this whole session. We know there's many reasons why people are falling into poverty nowadays, whether it's low paid work, insecure work, housing costs, the benefit freeze, or also currently the rising cost of living, which we aren't seeing an end to. All of these things combine to lock people in poverty. And poverty in itself can seem like a really massive, unsolvable problem. You'll think about it and you're like, what are we meant to do about it? And we hear people talking quite a lot about different types of poverty. However, ideally, we wouldn't separate up types of poverty. So people need food banks, for example, because they don't have enough money for food, in the same way that people that are unable to afford tampons or heating are struggling because there just isn't enough money for them to pay for these things. And when we're talking about food poverty, period poverty, or energy poverty separately, the danger is that people may think that the solution is then giving out food or tampons or energy vouchers. And although that will help in the short term and alleviate the crisis situation, in the long term, it does not address the structural issues that leave people without enough money. And we risk downplaying that all of these are just symptoms of not having enough money. So instead of talking about food poverty, we should be talking about poverty and advocate for cash first solutions. So things that put cash into people's pockets and bank accounts wherever is possible. On this slide, you can see the results of the DWP Family Resources Survey that was published in 2024. And I know there's no data set measuring food insecurity currently that is bulletproof, but this is one that is gives you a good sense of what's happening and what's out there. So of all the people reporting food insecurity in this particular data collection set, only 14% was captured by a food bank. So only 14 people went to a food bank. And this really means that any data coming out of food banks, where Trussell or IFAN member food banks, is merely a tip of the iceberg, and people are really struggling in silence. Just going to play a short video for you. It doesn't have any sound, so hopefully all will be good. But there you go. So that really just highlights the different journeys that people go through when either they're going to a food shop to buy their food with their money, or using their vouchers to buy food from the shop, compared to the journey that they go through if they have to go to a food bank, and also then what happens at the food bank while the food is being processed. So like I mentioned, IFAN advocates for ending the need for charitable food aid in the UK more widely, but also just in Scotland as well. So this includes a cash first approach where we're addressing the root causes of poverty, maximising people's incomes through adequate, timely and sufficient social security payments, and also through paid and secure work. This diagram shows you the hierarchy of cash first approaches and what can be done on different levels. So looking at those income focused crisis support, which is such an important but only a partial element of the broader cash first approach to food insecurity. The broader approach includes not only the adequacy of income, but through those social security payments and wages, but also bolstering advice services that are out there. So advice really is key, because if people don't actually know what is out there and what they can access, a lot of times the first point of call will then be a food bank. And of course, there are then routes to that advice afterwards, but it would be so integral to capture people before they end up at a food bank. So bolstering those advice services to ensure that everyone is able to access any existing financial entitlements is such an integral part of the whole approach. And this hierarchy here really just shows you what can be done on a food aid provider level, or an advice agency level, or local authority level, just to give some sort of actions of how we can change the system slowly, one action at a time. So whether it is advice agencies providing vouchers instead of food bank referrals wherever it's possible, and where it's the best option for the person that they're helping out, it's just some things to consider on different levels. And what can we do then? It's really important to realise those strengths of the collaborative relationships that are in Glasgow. I think Glasgow is in a lot of ways ahead of the cash first work compared to other parts of the country. But it's really important to notice that everyone has a part to play in the whole partnership working and the whole system in general. So just talking about cash first approaches to poverty, strengthening those referral pathways into support, spreading the word about the Worrying About Money leaflets so that people can get a chance to access crisis cash support and expert support as well at the earliest opportunity before ending up at the food bank, just to maximise their income wherever is possible. So this leaflet is very practical. I'm sure many of you will have come across it before, I hope at least, but if you haven't, I'm just going to talk through it quickly before I take up too much of your time at this point of the session. So it's just one really positive step to take to strengthen those formal and informal support and referral pathways into that advice and support. And as I mentioned before, advice is fundamental to cash first approach. And this leaflet aims to connect people to that local advice, the closest agencies to them, wherever is possible. The leaflet is based on learning from Scotland's The Menu for Change project way back when, and it's both for people who are currently struggling, but also for frontline support workers. So for you all to use as a tool to help you navigate those conversations about money worries, which can be really, really tricky. So actually going back to the initial slide here. So on your left-hand side, you can see step one, where the leaflet introduces step one, what's the problem, which comes with 4 different scenarios looking into people's different situations that they may be in. Those all link up to step 2, which is on the second page. Then when you open up the leaflet, you can see different options that might be available. So whether it's Scottish welfare funds, maximising your income, debt advice, benefit advance, hardship payment, challenge your decision, they're quite self-explanatory for us potentially who work with these things all the time. But for someone who's struggling, they may not know what is actually out there. So it's really important to lay it out in a clear and concise way, giving a little bit of a glimpse into what they might be able to access. And then again, these numbers link up to step 3, which are direct organisations that are able to help you with free and confidential advice. And then in Glasgow, there's a myriad of things and organisations that are able to help out. So it's a really full to the brim leaflet for sure. And then we also have another support section, which is other forms of holistic support, because we understand that people come to organisations with a massive complexity of issues. Now, it's not just one singular issue that they're presenting, but many other things as well. So aiming to look at people as a whole and sorting out many issues at once. So providing other forms of support there as well for mental health, for example, and so on. And there's also a section for migrants with no recourse to public funds as well, because there's an issue with people with NRPF accessing support. So trying to cover all of our bases in the small space that we have. And just to mention also, as a final thing before I hand over to Lisa, is that we also have alternative versions for the leaflet, trying to maximize the reach of the leaflet and the accessibility of the leaflet. So for Glasgow, we have seven translated versions: Arabic, Slovakian, Spanish, Polish, Urdu, Romanian, and Farsi. And we also have, or we can make available, an easy read version and a poster. And we've also commissioned an audio version and BSL version recently for North Lanarkshire, actually. So those are things to explore if that's something that would be helpful for Glasgow as well. So you can always just reach out to IFAN or myself just to recommend different types of versions of the leaflet that might be useful for the area, because we're always looking to expand the project and make it work for the people who are using the resources. And the leaflet has been distributed quite widely. There's a link, I think it'll go into the chat as well for you, where you can access the interactive version of the leaflet and then also order your free printed copies of the leaflet. And so that brings me to a close, and I'll pass over to Faiza.
Thank you so much. That was a lovely presentation, Emma. So over to our next speaker is Lisa Belletty. She's going to provide more information about the role of Trussell across the UK and especially in Scotland. Lisa's an area manager at Trussell, working closely alongside 15 food banks across South and West Scotland. Lisa began her career in children's services, working in several London local authorities with a focus on participation and policy, before working for the Mayoral Advisor for Health and Families at the Greater London Authority. She has also run programmes with and for foster carers and young people with care experience. After moving to Scotland in 2015, she's managed long-term partnerships across 3 charitable trusts before joining Trussell. Over to you, Lisa.
Thank you, Faiza. Hello, everybody. I'm here today to talk a little bit about Trussell and the work that we do as an anti-poverty charity and community of food banks. My role is as an area manager for South West Scotland, so covering Glasgow and everything west of Glasgow, across to Greenock and right down to Stranraer, so really beautiful, warm part of the world. Today, I'd like to sort of say that you might notice my slides look a little bit different. So Trussell has had a recent brand refresh, and this has really been something that we've done with food banks, with people with lived experience of financial hardship, and our team and partners. We know that our vision to end the need for food banks cannot be done alone. And I think we wanted to refresh our brand to really reflect that sense of togetherness and the work that we do alongside our fantastic community of food banks and other partners that will be on the call today. So Emma, if we could have the next slide, please. So to tell you a little bit about Trussell. So we're an anti-poverty charity and we're a community of food banks. And we exist so that everybody in the UK is free from hunger. We work together to ensure that no one needs a food bank to survive, whilst providing emergency food and practical support in the meantime for those who are left without enough money to live on. Across the UK, as you can see on the slide, we are 1,400 food bank locations, 36,000 volunteers, thousands of partners and supporters, which we're really grateful for, and millions of people. Next slide, please, Emma. So we know that food banks are a lifeline, but they're not the solution. In Scotland, we have 41 fantastic food banks within the Trussell community, and each is an independent charity with their own governance and their own constitution. Out of these 41, we have 5 who serve the Glasgow city centre. So that's Glasgow South West, Glasgow South East, Glasgow North East, Glasgow North West, and East Dunbartonshire, who have a distribution centre just over the border in the north of Glasgow. And our food banks, some of whom I think may be on the call today, share our vision that they shouldn't need to exist. Emma, if we could have the next slide, please. So I think the key thing to say really is that we're aware that food banks weren't set up to respond to this level of need. From my time visiting food banks, many were started in a cupboard, in a church or a kitchen, and have grown exponentially over the last few years. And we're hearing from food banks about the depth of hardship that people are experiencing and how this is increasing for people. And you can see from this quote on this slide from Peeblesshire Food Bank about the kind of depth of hardship that they're supporting people with. And we know that we work alongside many other charitable food aid providers, from Emma and the IFAN network on the call to other independent food banks, pantries, larders and school food banks. And our hunger in Scotland research really emphasises the point Emma made earlier, that those receiving food parcels are the tip of the iceberg, and many people are food insecure but are not currently being supported. And we think this is really wrong and that this needs to change. Next slide, please, Emma. So one of the things we're quite passionate about at Trussell is collecting data, and the reason that we do that is because we think it's really important to tell that story and to demonstrate the extent of the challenge and why things need to change and how. So our figures show that 3.1 million parcels were distributed by food banks in the Trussell network from April 23 to March 24. And I think when you say it like that, 3.1 million parcels, we're having lots of big figures thrown around, aren't we? But each of those parcels represents people in need, people who didn't have food and who are forced to turn to food banks. And that's really important for us to keep at the heart of the conversation with, different decision makers. So of these 3.1 million parcels, over 250,000 were in Scotland. And this number has increased over the last 5 years. So you can see on this slide, so this is still the UK, but it shows you how that has increased, and you'll see a bit of a peak in the pandemic, a small drop, and then rises again. So it's really at record levels of need. And Emma, if we could have the next slide, I think this is Scotland stats. So it shows you that over 250,000 were in Scotland, so 262,400, and yeah, a 21% increase in the last 5 years. On the right-hand side, in the little green box, you'll see the Glasgow statistics that show that almost 32,000 parcels were distributed by food banks in the Trussell network in Glasgow over the same period, April 23 to March 24. 1 in 3 of these was for children and young people, and these were distributed across 18 distribution centres, which are run by our fantastic food banks within the city. And if we could have the next slide. So every year at Trussell, we release end of year and mid-year statistics, and those are to show parcel numbers during those periods of time, and also to share some data around why people are being driven to food banks to use them. And so our end of year stats are in spring, and each year we do a breakdown for Scotland, which is quite useful and insightful, and here's some headlines from that breakdown. Our next mid-year stats will be released in November, so I can't share those with you just yet. So our findings from spring show 4 key things. One is that need is at record levels, not only across the UK, but also in Scotland, and that's been sort of sustaining at a really high level now for a long time. The second is that Trussell did some research, or commissioned the Fraser of Allender Institute to do some research around the Scottish child payment, and it shows that it's had a limited impact. So if you really dig into the stats, it shows that there's been a small but statistically significant decrease for two kinds of households. So households with children and young people aged 5 to 16, but no younger children and young people, and single adult households with children and young people aged 0 to 4. And I think for us, we think that the Scottish child payment is a really important sort of element of Cash First, and we would like to see that increased further to benefit more households. The third thing to say is that pension age households are more likely to need to use a food bank. Pension and poverty reduction over the last few years is a success I think Scotland is rightly incredibly proud of. And although people of pension age are a really small percentage of those coming to food banks, so only 4% of the total, those numbers doubled between 2018-19 and 2023-24. So we do see that there are some pensioners who are likely to need a food bank. And I think with the winter payment cuts also that may be increased. And finally, the main reason, so we do ask the partners who refer to our food banks why people need a food bank. And the main reason is because income is insufficient to meet the cost of the essentials. And that's why we have a big campaign called Guarantee Our Essentials, which you can find out more about on our website, which is about raising the level of social security to meet the cost of everyday essentials and ensure that nobody can be brought below that level by benefit delays or sanctions. If we could have the next slide, please, Emma. So we know that people don't come to food banks because they have a lack of food, but because they don't have enough money in their pockets to buy food. And we know that for some groups, there is an overrepresentation of people coming to food banks because of the position they're put in by the social security system. So, for example, we know that 3 in 4 people referred to food banks are disabled, around 3 in 4, 73%. We know that 1 in 5 people, 19% of people who come have issues with benefit delays or waits or sanctions. And we know that the thread in all of this is a social security system and reforming our social security system to provide just and compassionate support. And like many of you, will have our eyes keenly on the budget announcements today. So I think, yeah, sorry, Emma, second to last slide. Thank you. So I think the other thing we really want to say is that I know that sometimes our vision of a future without the need for food banks can be met with some skepticism, and I understand that, especially for those of you that day in, day out are supporting people who are experiencing poverty. But we really do believe that a future without the need for food banks is possible, and our community of food banks really join us with that. So we know that not so long ago, food banks weren't needed, certainly not to the same extent that they are today, and that things can be different. We know that successes in pensioner poverty and decreasing that have happened. And we want to work with all of you and lots of our partner organisations to really make sure that we have 4 things, which are on this slide: a supportive social security system that really gives people the protection that they deserve and that they're entitled to, that people are able to get support at the right time, so easy access to advice and support on money and financial inclusion, for example. And we know that Sarah-Jayne will be talking about that from Cass's perspective coming up. People are supported in the right way for them. So if people have caring responsibilities or disabilities, that support is tailored to them and really appropriate for their circumstances. And finally, that everybody has the security to unlock their future. So things like secure and rewarding work are principles that are threaded throughout society, and also things like affordable housing. And at Trussell, we have these things called building blocks, which are the kind of key components that we believe should come together to really support people in these 4 ways. And finally, that was my last slide. I just want to play you a video. So this is our video that went along with our brand refresh, and it really just shows you a little bit more about our mission at Trussell and what we do. Thank you.
Food banks are being pushed to a breaking point, with millions of people unable to afford the essentials we all need to survive. And
blocks that will end hunger in the UK require us all to act.
That's why the charity is urging everyone, politicians, charities, businesses and individuals, to play their part.
We need urgent action on hunger in the UK. People are turning to food banks because they don't have enough money to live on. Millions of us want a future where no one needs a food bank to survive. Until that happens, we'll be there for people in their hardest moments. Hopefully we can have a difference. We all have a part to play. Together, change is possible. Together, we know how to right this wrong. Together, we can end hunger for good.
Thank you so much for such an informative presentation, Lisa. Our next presentation comes from Sarah-Jayne Dunn. Sarah-Jayne is the Financial Health Policy Manager for Citizens Advice Scotland. She has over 12 years' experience as a frontline money advisor in the Citizens Advice Network, assisting clients facing eviction and repossession as well as complex debt situations. She has also worked in schools providing financial capability education, and she's managed the mental health and money advice service for over 3 years, gaining insight and expertise on how debt can have an impact on mental health and well-being. Throughout her career, Sarah-Jayne has been active within the money advice sector in Scotland, especially in providing insight to government agencies such as Social Security Scotland, DWP, HMRC, and Accountant and Bankruptcy on how debt can have an impact on the people of Scotland's mental health and financial well-being, as well as working with the wider creditor and financial sector. I'll pass to you now, Sarah.
Thank you, Faiza. Thanks for that introduction. I just go on to the next slide, please. So today what I'm just going to do is give a little bit of background on the Citizens Advice Network, as well as look at our aims and principles, but importantly, how can our CABs help, as well as some of the national projects and online tools that Citizens Advice Scotland have available for supporting people, whether as an advisor or to give to folks who are looking for advice and support. So just go on to the next slide. So at present, there are around currently 59 Citizen Advice Bureaus across Scotland. They're independently run with their own boards. Citizen Advice Scotland is a membership organisation, and we're basically there to support our CABs, as well as run, as I say, our national projects. We also listen to the issues and the barriers that our clients are seeing on the ground, and then we try to see where we can pull national and local policy levers to see and where changes can be made. The first Citizens Advice Bureau actually appeared in 1939. Over 200 across the UK were established, and at that time they were governed by a central committee in London. The first Scottish Bureau was actually opened in Glasgow, but further bureaus then opened in Edinburgh, Aberdeen, and soon across the whole of Scotland. As it is now, the great majority of our staff in a bureau are volunteers. We're a volunteer-led organisation. And the first initial establishment of the Citizens Advice CABs were really to give a UK government's response to the need for advice and information at a time of war. So they were things of like how to help people who have been bombed out, tracing relatives, lost ration books. But over the years, and certainly over the decades, that role has changed. But throughout it, we try to remain a familiar, independent place where people can turn for help. And to this day, we can continue to be a part of the daily life of people of Scotland. But increasing concern started around the 60s and 70s that a London-based information service wouldn't really take sufficient account of Scotland's distinct legal and educational systems, as well as their own distinct needs. So in 1975, the first regional office for Scotland was open, and then became fully dependent in 1980. And by 1988, we had adopted the trading name of Citizens Advice Scotland. So we're just actually celebrating our 85th anniversary in this year. So as I always keep saying, we're a tough old bird, but we're definitely going to be sticking around. And that is down to our aims and principles. So we go on to the next slide. So we call these our twin pillars. So effectively, everything that we do at Citizens Advice Scotland and within our network, we aim to achieve these two pillars. The first being to ensure that individuals do not suffer through a lack of knowledge of their rights and responsibilities, or the services to them, or through an inability to express their needs effectively. The second, which is the pillar that I tend to work mostly under, is to exercise a responsible influence on the development of social policies, both services, both locally and nationally, and that is known as social policy. So we go on to our next slide. These pillars are guided by our 12 main principles, and I'm going to, I used to be able to actually recite these off by heart, but I can't do that anymore with my my now older brain. So we remain to be independent. We always act in the interest of our clients without the influence of any outside bodies, and that goes for each of our bureaus. As I said, each of them are completely independent. The practices of that is solely decided by those individual bureaus. No other individual organisation or agency, even if they're given financial support or other aid, will influence the decision making of our Citizen Advice bureaus. We're impartial, so we aim to not judge our clients or make assumptions. Our service is open to to everyone and everyone is treated equally. And that is so fundamental to a lot of our volunteers and staff within the network, that we are open to all, regardless of that person's situation. We never look to see if someone is deserving of our support. We support them no matter what. And we always try to make sure that any representations made on behalf of clients are faithfully trying to express that client's personal intentions and point of view. And we do that by being confidential. So we do not pass anything on a client tells us, or even if the fact that visited us, without their express permission. So nothing will ever be passed to anyone outside the Bureau. Even our advice quality assessments that we do not get access to our client records without express permission from our clients. And it's a function that we make sure that even when we are working in policy and trying to influence those responsible for social policy decisions, we try to do that by bringing to light the impact and situations that our clients are seeing, but we do not make any details public, which might enable clients to be identified without express consent. We're free, so no one pays for any part of our service. It provides information, advice, assistance. We even provide representation in court and tribunals completely free of charge. We do not withhold services from any clients, even if we believe that they are able to pay for an alternative source. And the reason for that is to encourage people to take advantage of the service and not fear that they're going to incur any expenses. We aim to empower clients by helping themselves to understand the situation and decide what course of action is best by them. And we do that by laying out all their options, trying to debunk any sort of myths that they might have, and help them explain what sort of course of action they can adopt. It is then up to the individual client. So the right to decide is fundamental. The clients have the right to decide their own objectives and whether or not to accept the advice and assistance that we offer them. We do not make assumptions about the client's objectives, and as I say, we try to identify all the options available to them and present those fairly so that clients can make informed decisions without pressure. We go on to the next slide. So we have a whole vast of topics and advice services that we can provide. No one, whoever contacts the Citizens Advice Bureau, will be turned away because we don't deal with that problem. Whilst we may offer a generalist service, we do deal with specific issues and specialist services as well. But if we're not able to provide that support, we will always find a way. And I used to say this to advisors that I trained, as well as clients when I was working on the front lines, that if I might not know the answer, I will find out who does know the answer, and I'll get that answer from them for them. We are completely voluntary in the sense that volunteers are the heart of our network. We actually probably run most bureaus are 90% volunteers, 10% paid staff. That could be different depending on each of the bureaus, but we first and foremost are a voluntary service. We aim to be an essential component to our communities and other areas and support. And we advocate for the employment of paid staff and member bureaus to make sure that we maximise that contribution and effectiveness of volunteers. Accessibility is definitely a key aim for our services, and we try to be as accessible to all by using premises that might be central located, or making sure that we have outreaches in areas that are harder to get access to, such as Highlands and Islands communities. We try to be open at times suitable to local demand, but that is very dependent on funding and being able to have the volunteering staff available at that. So we try to offer a whole multi-channel approach to our advice, whether that's online through web chat, as well as over the phone and our online advice pages. We're trying to be effective in the sense that making sure that we have strict audit practices to ensure the quality advice that we're given. So all our bureaus who offer housing benefits and debt advice have to have Scottish national standards, and if they offer debt advice, they also have to be FCA accredited, and that is just to make sure that accuracy and appropriateness and completeness of our advice are always at the highest standards as possible. Accountability, so we're not just accountable to our clients, but we're also accountable to public, the funders and our wider network. So as I said, each of our bureaus are autonomous member bureaus, and they're democratically accountable to the communities that they serve. And then finally, social policy. So we seek to use the evidence that we collate through our bureaus on the ground to see the real life experiences of people, to then exercise responsible influence on the development of social policies, both locally and nationally. So why do people visit CAB? If we go on to our next slide. So people come to CABS for all types of reasons. It's not just benefits and debt, though a lot of people think that is just what we do. When I was an advisor, actually half the fun was opening the doors and finding out what was going to come through it. It was very Forrest Gump in that way, that you didn't really know what you were going to get until those doors opened and people came in or the phone rang. And they can come, people who come to their CABS are just like us. They're just in the need of the same type of help and advice that anyone might need at any time. And all we can try to do is listen and then see where we can support them. And some people don't know where to go when they need that type of help and who can help in that situation. And when I actually was given financial education in schools, the one thing that I always tried to kind of drill into young people in particular was that if you don't know what to do, Citizens Advice Bureau is a really good place to start. And we represent a whole diverse range of people in our society, from urban and rural environments to those who are often seldom heard or excluded or face barriers to equality, and even can be on opposite sides of the dispute sometimes. So we can have landlords and tenants, employer and employees, debtor and even creditors coming to us for support. Go on to the next slide. So as I said, we do host a whole range of topics of inquiry. So this is areas that we tend to support in, and there's so many that I won't go into all of them into detail, but top one is usually benefits. So every client that comes through our doors are offered a benefit check, even if they're only coming for something else. So then if they came for, say, support with legal processes, they will get offered a benefit check, and that's to make sure that people are not missing out on those potential benefit entitlements. Debt advice and support, whether it is simple debts to complex debt situations, housing, employment, utility issues, which has actually become very prominent in the last few years. And as I said, legal processes, including court advice, relationships, such as child custody disputes and child maintenance claims, finance and charity support, so including referrals to the likes of Trussell and other food banks, fuel banks, grant applications, and so many more. As I said, there's usually or rarely a topic that we do not support with. And as I said, if we don't know the answer, we sure will find out for it. So if we go to the next slide. So Citizens Advice Scotland, our 59-member bureau, and also our extra help unit, we form the largest independent advice network in Scotland. We deliver frontline advice services in over 250 service points, and that could be via our main offices, our outreaches, and we cover everything from city centres to island communities. Our extra help unit is a team of caseworkers based in Glasgow, but they help and assist vulnerable consumers from across Scotland, England and Wales with energy and postal complaints. And last year, we helped over 187,000 clients dealing with over 670,000 different advice issues. We helped complete over 24,000 benefit forms, as well as represented in over 2,500 tribunal and court outcomes. Throughout all of that work, what we helped is gained clients over £142 million, and that's money in people's pockets. And effectively what that means is for every £1 invested in our core services, we return about £14 in gains for people. But none of that is possible without the volunteers. We had over 1,500 volunteers last year contributing nearly 500,000 hours of their time in 2022-2023, and the monetary value of that amounts to over £8.1 million. And the volunteers get a lot of goodwill out of it, but a lot of them also, it helps them in their own journeys. 42% of those who volunteer in our services go on to paid employment and further education. Let's go on to our next slide. So how do CABS assist clients? So we do that through a whole host of different tasks, but mainly we inform our clients of their rights and also their responsibilities, but we help clients exercise those rights, including taking claims to small claims courts or to tribunals. We help make telephone calls, fill in forms, we deal with debts, we communicate with creditors, we also provide self-help tools, and basically try and provide clients with the tools and resources that they need to either help themselves or be assisted through such things as like bankruptcy or debt management plans. But what we're trying to do whenever we do any of that is look at the problems as a whole. So we look at holistic advice and a whole person's approach. So even if someone comes in with, say, a housing issue or an employment issue, we do try to dig a little bit deeper to see if there's anything else underneath that could be contributing to that or exacerbating that situation. And we try to liaise with different organisations on behalf of clients, such as DWP, councils, NHS boards, but there's a whole host that we will be able to support clients and either talking to that organisation organisation themselves or through ourselves as an advocate. And then we try to signpost clients as much as we can to other specialist services such as shelter, as I said, Trussell food banks and other mental health support. On to the next slide. But we also run national projects. So these are projects which are run by Citizens Advice Scotland, but through our Citizens Advice bureaus. So the first up is the Money Talk Plus team, and their links are all going to be shared. And that's delivered locally by the Citizens Advice bureaus, advising clients, especially families with children, about welfare rights, benefits and specialist debt. We also look at things like income maximisation and outgoings reduction to try and basically help improve clients' financial situations where possible. But people can also find information, guidance and tools on the website, as well as book appointments with their local CAB to get advice on money and managing debt. The advice itself on Money Talk Plus online is also available 24/7 as there's an online virtual assistant. We also have Help to Claim, which is helping people to make their first online claim for universal credit. And that is right up to the point of receiving their first payment as well. So we help advisors help clients identify if they're entitled, support them filling out their application, even preparing them for their first job centre appointment, and then making sure that the payments they receive are correct. We also have our gambling support service, and this has 4 aims actually. So it's raising awareness around gambling harms, but they also provide training to frontline workers, both within the Citizens Advice Bureau and externally. And that is to help identify clients who might be affected by gambling harms. We also, the service provides support to clients, and they work collaboratively with Gamble Aware's other partner organisations in Scotland. There's a whole host of more information on the link there. If we go on to our next slide. One of the biggest things that we offer and support through and work with on is Pension Wise, and this offers free and impartial guidance to those who are aged over 50 about their defined contribution pension options by explaining how each of the options work, its impact on tax and benefits, how to avoid pension scams and shop around safely for guidance and support. It is run in conjunction with Money and Pension Service and their Money Helper, but there's all the different types of ways to get advice, so you can either do so online or over the phone and even in person. And we also have our patient advice and support service. So this is providing support to patients, their carers and families in dealing with the NHS and helping people to understand their rights and responsibilities, as well as if they encounter problems. But we also use this service to feed back to the NHS so that we can make improvements where necessary around healthcare provision. And now on to the next slide. So what I wanted to do is also provide links to our online tools, because there's a whole host of them. So the first one on there is the most important. It is the link to find your local bureau for yourselves or for service users. And effectively, all you need to do is pop in the postcode or town, and it will show where the closest bureau is, along with contact information, opening hours, and the support that they can provide. We also have a vast array of online information and advice, from everything from benefits to debt to housing to immigration, on our online website, which is the second link there. We also have our money map, which was designed during COVID to support to provide a third option for clients who might not be able to get access to a bureau at that time. And it has a whole range of online support, as well as the best tools and resources. And then finally, we have our Check My Council Tax. So council tax reduction is a very complex system in Scotland, and there's a whole host of different discounts, exemptions, reductions that people might be eligible for that they might not know about. So we also get Check My Council Tax tool, allows you to kind of put in your details, and it will allow you give you information on what to apply for. And that's me.
Thank you so much, Sarah. That was absolutely jam-packed with content. Don't worry, folks, we're happy to share the links and the slides with you later. Next up, we've got Emma again, this time talking us through how to approach conversations about money worries. Over to you, Emma.
Thanks, Faiza. I'm so glad to be following up all of these wonderful information-filled presentations. And I'm just going to bring us back to kind of where we started and why this session is actually here, after providing you with all of that massive context. So you know firsthand the ways in which best to support the people accessing your services, because you might already know these people, or even if they're coming to you for the first time, you have come across people so many times in your work that you know what to provide them best. So I'm not going to talk about that. What I am going to talk about, though, is the ways in which you can use the Glasgow Worrying About Money leaflet, which does have a lot of citizens' advice bureaus listed on there, so that you can signpost people to those in a way where you feel confident to do that. And the leaflet is really just there to support the work that you're already doing, not adding anything to your work, but to alleviate a little bit of stress, take a little bit off your back. And I think the main thing here is that the leaflet is such a powerful tool that you can use to signpost people to support in your area. So it is just really great to have something like that. And I know Scottish people generally don't really want to talk about money, even if it's with your own families, let alone with strangers or clients that are coming to your services. So this is just one thing that you can potentially use in your day-to-day work. And if I could just get that slide to move on. There we go. And what I want to instill in you, I suppose, as like the final thing here of this session, and something to take away from this session, is to give yourself some grace, because you don't need to know everything about the complexities of the social security system, because it is truly just such a complex thing to navigate. All you need to do is to be that friendly face that is able to signpost people to places such as Citizens Advice and other organisations on the leaflet, because these people are actually trained to navigate those complex systems and complex issues that people present with. So you can, like I said, take a little bit of stress off your back and signpost people onward. What you're seeing here are just some conversation starters and ways to approach people, which you may already be doing. So just being that listening ear, using open questions, breaking the ice in some sort of way when you're approaching people and having those conversations. Building that rapport with people, because that is integral for them to start opening up to you about what actually is going on in their lives. Now, adding the Worrying About Money leaflet into the conversation and exploring the information on that, you could potentially ask people whether they have seen the leaflet. If you can even ask people to grab a few leaflets and distribute them in their area to people who might find it helpful, which is like an indirect way of providing them with the information as well, and they can then take it or leave it if they want to, because that also gives them some agency. They have some leaflets and they're helping their friends out, but at the same time they might also be able to access that support themselves. So there's just different ways of approaching those conversations without actually having to directly ask about someone's money worries, and using that leaflet as like a conversation starter of, have you seen this leaflet? Do you think any of the information on this leaflet would be useful to you? So you can just talk through the leaflet with someone as well and ask if it's okay to give some information about the leaflet or the things on the leaflet to people if they may find it helpful. And it is really great to familiarize yourself with the content of the leaflet, even though it is really straightforward. It follows the 3 steps that I introduced earlier. But again, it's just to highlight that you don't need to know everything. It's good to know what's on the leaflet roughly and what is actually out there in Glasgow. But just to say that again and kind of reiterate that the leaflet doesn't have every single organisation listed on it, because it just gives a little bit of a glimpse into what is out there. But yeah, definitely familiarize yourself with the content and make sure that you feel confident in utilising that as a tool. And like I said, I hope the leaflet is something that can help your day-to-day rather than add more into it. It's not something that you need to fill out. It's not something that you need to feel pressure using. It's really just something to take some pressure off yourself and give yourself an opportunity to rely on something other than just your mind, which will already be overburdened. Finally, just before we move on to the questions, because we have Wonderful 5 minutes left. I'm just going to pop the Mentimeter back up here at this point before we have a follow-up of people. If you scan the QR code and go and fill out the same questions that you did previously, or click on the link that will appear in the chat for you, it'll be really helpful for us to kind of understand how the session went and whether any of the information that we provided was helpful in getting the information out there and sharing that. I'll pass back over to Faiza.
Thank you so much. That was a really helpful use of the leaflet to have these conversations, Emma. It's really helpful. I would like to say a huge thank you to all of our speakers and everyone who's attended today. The webinar has been recorded and it'll be made available after the event. We would really welcome your feedback and thoughts on this webinar, and we'll send you a follow-up email with an evaluation form. Your comments will help us develop any future webinars. Finally, a special thank you to the Glasgow Centre for Population Health Communications team for helping us to put the event on today. And thank you so much to everyone, because we've managed to finish with a minute to spare, which is wonderful. So I hope you have a wonderful rest of day. Thank you so much. Bye now.